All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome all members and guests to the January 10th, 2023 Public Hearing Committee meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, so please ensure that your phones are on silent. For those attending virtually, please mute yourself when not speaking. When called upon to speak, please turn your camera on and unmute yourself. Staff in attendance, please use the Microsoft Teams hand raise feature icon to be called upon and to remove it after speaking. And Councillor Huffman, if I happen to miss you for any reason, feel free to just turn your mic on and speak. I now call the public hearing committee meeting to order. We're going to approve the agenda, but we have the following amendments. Item 4.2 attachment C was replaced with the correct attachment. Item 4.2 attachment A, the following clerical amendments were made to the transportation section. The first sentence was removed as it was included in error. The number of units was corrected from 7 to 6. The word report was changed to traffic report. Item 4.2, the presentation from Agent John Valley of G. Douglas Valley was added. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as approved. Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Shelley. All those in favor? And that is carried. Any opposed? Perfect. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? Seeing none. Now officially open the public meeting held under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and county policies. Please be advised that to preserve your right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, you are required to make comments or provide written submissions prior to the passage of a bylaw. These meetings are to allow the public to provide initial comments on presented planning matters. For 2 of the items on our agenda today, committee is requested to make a decision on the matters. For 2, that's not correct. Disregard that. We're going to go directly into 4.1, which is 1409 Wyndham Road, CD 23-001, and I will pass it over to Brandon, our General Manager of Community Development.
Thank you through the chair. So our first item, the official plan amendment and zoning amendment, we'll have Hannah will do the presentation. And then the second one, we can go direct to Mohammed for that zoning amendment as well. So turn it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Brandon. If you permit me one moment, I will share my screen for the presentation. Thank you. The proposal involves a zoning bylaw and official plan amendment. For some context, the zoning bylaw application was previously heard at the July 5th, 2022 Public Hearing Committee. Staff identified to the agent that the application had not addressed an official plan policy, and subsequently an official plan amendment has been received by staff. As this official plan amendment is a new application, staff are bringing it to the Public Hearing Committee today with the associated zoning bylaw amendment for information. So as a refresher, I will provide an overview of the site. The subject property is located at 1409 Wyndham Road 19 in the Township of Wyndham, southwest of the intersection of Wyndham Roads 10 and 19. The surrounding land uses are predominantly agricultural. The subject lands are designated and zoned agricultural in Norfolk County's official plan and zoning bylaw, respectively. On the west side, there is a relatively minor portion of lands designated and zoned hazard lands, with a small overlay of significant woodlands. An application, as mentioned, was received to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a reduced lot area of 20.4 hectares in order to facilitate the disassembly of agricultural land for agricultural purposes, also known as a farm split. The agricultural purposes in this instance are floriculture inside greenhouses and field crops. The purpose of this application is to create 2 separate businesses on the northern and southern portion of the lands, each with their own greenhouse complexes and field crops. As noted earlier, staff identified to the agent that the application had not addressed an official plan policy, specifically section 7.2.4, subsection IV, which requires applications to disassemble agricultural lots that are less than approximately 40 hectares in size to demonstrate that nearby lots of similar size to that proposed are not available and suitable for the intended agricultural use. As a result, an official plan amendment has been received to preclude this policy requirement. So the only new information that planning staff has received since the previous public hearing committee meeting was a comment from a resident and circulation to the Agricultural Advisory Board. So beginning with the resident, they expressed some concern with the proposal for a range of reasons, which included questioning if the viability of the resulting farm parcels would be maintained, the potential for future severances on the subject lands, a perceived inconsistency by the agricultural community in how severances are approved, and it also noted a nearby location which had similar application approved for a zoning bylaw amendment, but was subsequently used for cannabis. I have discussed this application further with the resident and asked if they would like to provide any additional comments, but have not received any to this date. Staff sought consideration from the Agricultural Advisory Board on whether the application met the intent of official plan criteria, specifically whether the lots created would be viable, and the availability of nearby lots, in addition to any long-range planning considerations. We had a good discussion and received helpful information from the AAB. Key items discussed were a concern that this may be precedent-setting. However, due to sufficient evidence and rationale about the type and operation of businesses being provided by the applicant, the Agricultural Advisory Board understood that the business would be viable and ultimately recommended support. Reports submitted as part of a complete application include a planning justification report and business plans, which were circulated in addition to the resident comments to the Agricultural Advisory Board for their input to staff. No other key concerns have been identified by departmental staff or external agencies. And preliminary considerations related to these applications include agriculture and jobs and employment. Next steps are that the planning staff are currently preparing a recommendation report for both the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment files, and the final bylaws for council's consideration on January 24th. Thank you for your time, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to staff? Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And a couple of questions. The first one, I was at the Agricultural Advisory Board meeting, and I recall it was the 23rd of August, and it wasn't all that well attended because most of the people on that board were busy, but it did meet the quorum, which is great. But in the future, I just wonder if it would be possible to get a better appreciation for this operation and the project and the expansion, if we could have the consultant come in to make a statement to the Ag Advisory Board. Your comments on that?
Tricia Givens here, Director of Planning. I can answer that question on behalf of staff. That is certainly important feedback and agree with the timing. Unfortunately, the timing was based on the application. In terms of bringing the agent, that is certainly something we can implement going forward.
That's wonderful. I think it's quite important for the members of that board, if they're going to be commenting, that they're fully briefed on the application. The other question was with respect to Harry Cummings' business plan. Was that a request of the planning department, or was that the consultant, Mr. Rowe? Did he offer that up, or was that a request of the planning department?
Thank you for your question. So I would need to review the pre-consultation notes for the proposal, but my understanding it is a requirement that is outlined in the official plan, and it was submitted as part of the application.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. We have no registered speakers for this item. Is there anyone in the chambers who wishes to speak to this report? Mr. Rowe, go ahead. Mr. Rowe, if you wouldn't mind signing yourself in at that book there whenever you're ready.
I will, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm the agent for the applicant. This has been a fairly long process. I think somewhere 2 years plus, but hopefully we're finally at the end stages. The requirement for the official plan amendment comes out of a policy in the plan that says if you're considering a farm split, you have to see if that particular use could go to a neighboring property that perhaps would be smaller than what you're proposing. However, in this case, we're talking about two viable greenhouse operations. So if one took the interpretation of that policy, then the suggestion would be that we would find a vacant parcel, and we'd pick up our greenhouses and somehow move them down the road and reset them up, which frankly is somewhat ridiculous. So in my original report, my position was that that particular policy wasn't relevant to this particular application. However, upon discussion with staff, and my question was if I have my client submit an additional application with additional fees, can I expect staff support? And I did receive confirmation that staff would be able to support the application if I, in fact, submitted the additional paperwork. There was some concern, I think, again, dealing with the Agricultural Liaison Committee, Advisory Committee. Historically, applicants have been invited to those meetings because that way the committee gets to either ask questions, specific questions, to which the agent or the applicant can answer, and get a chance to deal with any kind of issues that might come up that staff probably wouldn't be in a position to respond to. That's also been the practice of the dealing with the environmental liaison committee as well, dealing with hazard lands and environmentally sensitive areas, that type of thing. Typically in the past, I've been invited to those meetings and get to speak to the application and make sure that the people in attendance have a full understanding. Getting back to this particular application, we did submit a business plan prepared by Dr. Cummings. It's one of the well-known, I guess, right across Canada as one of the top agricultural economists, professor from the University of Guelph. And he's quite clearly set out in his report the viability of both of the greenhouse operations. The other, I guess, issue raised by one of the neighboring properties, and this goes back to a previous application a number of years ago. I was involved with a greenhouse operation across the road, and at that time, the bigger issue of the day was the gray market cannabis growers, which I sense it has somewhat sorted itself out. But in this particular case, the applicants have a long history of growing flowers, have an established niche market for that, and they're of an age that I would assume they'll be growing flowers for quite a while into the future. I also noted in the staff report there is a final, basically a planning report prepared by staff confirming that the proposal can bring brought forward for this application as well as the zoning application does comply with the PPS and the official plan policies. So with that, and I have reviewed the draft OPA and zoning amendment, they look fine to me. And we would hope that council will deal with this in a favorable context. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rowe. Any questions directed to him? Seeing none. Okay, thanks. It looks like we'll be discussing this at the end of the month again. So I'm sure we'll see you then. Is there anyone else in council chambers who wishes to speak today? No. Is there anyone on the line who wishes to speak to this file? This report. Okay. Does someone wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councillor Van Passen, staff's recommendation, or okay. Councillor Columbus. Councillor Huffman, just moving, offering to move, or would you wish to speak?
Offering to move.
Thank you very much. Okay, all of those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item 4.2, we're going to move on to 210 Argyle Street, which is CD 23003. Brandon or Mohammed, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon. I'm going to start the slide now. The subject lands are located at the east side of Norfolk Street South in Simcoe urban area. It is at the north of Norfolk Golf and Country Club. It is a 0.76 hectare small infill site fronting Argyle Street. The land is surrounded by significant woodlands with low density residential development at the north side. The golf course is at the east and south, and there is a seniors apartment complex at the west side of the site. Through Madam Chair, the subject lands are designated as urban residential, which means residential development is permitted. The site is zoned as urban residential type 2, which allows semi-detached dwellings. And the development proposal is for 3 semi-detached buildings with a total of 6 units. And that will be, that is proposed in form of a future condominium corporation. As a private development, it will require 2 residential parking for every unit and a total of 2 visitor parking with a barrier-free parking space. The units will be accessed by a 7.3 meter private road through the driveway from Argyle Street. The zoning bylaw amendment will just add a special provision, and that will be to consider the whole site as one lot. And the reason is to give some more flexibility for the layout of the condominium development. As part of the application, we received a number of technical reports, including a planning justification report, a functional servicing report, a traffic impact study, and a scoped environmental impact study. The environmental impact study was a requirement because of the surrounding significant woodlands. And there are a few recommendations are provided through the report, which includes minimization of outdoor lighting, recommendation of tree removal between the summer and winter, just not to coincide with bird breeding season, appropriate stockpiling and reapplication of topsoil, and appropriate erosion and sediment control. Our forestry staff has visited the site and has no major concerns, but will also provide a comments letter on this development. We are yet to receive any engineering comments, but staff is expecting that there will be a holding provision until water and wastewater allocation is confirmed. And no public comments are received as of yet. There are planning considerations that staff will further review before the final report. Of them, staff will work with the applicant to determine the parkland dedication or cash in lieu or parkland. Staff will further review the parking facility and any other zoning requirements. Staff will also include the comments from forestry staff about the adjacent natural heritage features and recommendation of the environmental impact study. So our next step is reviewing all the public input, any technical comments, and complete a recommendation report as soon as possible for a decision. Staff recommend that this report, the zoning bylaw amendment of 210 Argyle Street, is received for information, and comments received as part of this meeting is considered for future recommendations. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Are there any questions of the committee to staff on the report? Seeing none. We have one registered speaker for this item. Assuming that's you today, sir. Oh, it's Mr. Valley. Sorry, put you on the spot there. Go ahead, John, and please sign in once you get up to the podium and have 5 minutes. And our staff putting up a slide deck for you? Okay. And John, you've got 5 minutes once you begin, and just a reminder that we're going to try to stick to new information that staff didn't present. Whenever you're ready, we are.
You actually want to hear me? That's great. Thank you so much for hearing us today. We are here on this property. My name's John Valley. I'm the president of Valley. We're architects, engineers, and land use planners. And we're representing Mr. Henry Boer, which many of you will know. Boer Homes is a second generation home builder here in Norfolk County. The property that we've talked about today is, as Mohammed mentioned, it's only six dwellings. There'd be 3 buildings, each building with 2 dwellings. They'd be semi-detached units. All the parking and everything required to conform to your bylaw. This is a very simple application. We're already zoned R2, which already permits semis. All we're doing is looking at special provisions to allow 3 buildings on 1 lot, because the normal R2 only allows 1 building per lot. So we're asking to have 3 on the site, and we're asking for a definition change that the entire condo block would be considered the lot. This is a housekeeping measure that we've actually asked staff a few times to bring forward so that we don't have to make this application every single time we do a condominium. But nonetheless, we're here asking for that again. And then there's also an application there so that the internal road would not be deemed a street. We're discussing that right now with Mohammed, and we'll be back to you on how that gets resolved when we come for the decision meeting. So it's very, very simple. The justification of this project is very easy. It's ultra consistent with your official plan. It actually implements all the things in your official plan, a variety of housing forms. You have to have, or your goal is 25% of your new housing is supposed to be directed through infill development, and this is an infill development, so this is something you're encouraging. 15% of your housing is goaled to be multifamily housing, so this qualifies there again. So we're helping you meet those targets that are within your official plan. The density meets your targets. The studies have all been done. Everything's good. If you want to see what these houses are going to look like, this is our architect's rendering of what they will be. So, you know, we're not talking squished little townhouses here. They'll have a nice presence. Every unit will look out on the golf course. So I imagine these will be higher end homes in a lovely area. They all have amenity space, 2 floors. Second floor will have a couple bedrooms, be a master bedroom on the main floor, but a lovely dwelling. Of course, you are all familiar with this more homes built faster concept up from the province. I'm not going to talk about this other than every single checkbox that's out there on that program from the government is checked by this development. So we're fitting the glove of what you're looking to approve. We have been at this now for several months. As you know, there's a backlog here. So Mayor Martin, you mentioned at the last application, we'd see you at the end of the month. I'm hoping we also might be back to see you again for decision meeting at the end of the month. Our client's been at this for some time, and we'd appreciate getting back to council for a decision as soon as we can. So any other questions, I'm here to answer.
I don't think I can help you with that one, but. Are there any questions to Mr. Valley, Councillor Columbus? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The staff is recommending the holding provision for water, wastewater. Any issue with that for you, or are you trying to expedite that, or?
Well, I am under the impression that there is water capacity available. People on this table would probably know that better than I do, and I see other applications are getting approved, so I'm not aware of any issue from sanitary. So we're certainly hopeful that once we get this approval, we can go get a building permit.
Okay, I believe we should get that clarified before you leave. Thanks.
Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, John, thanks for being here today, and I appreciate the application would make that sort of area much nicer. That derelict building was rather nice over there for a bit. I have just a couple of questions. I'm wondering if there has been any consultation with the Norfolk Golf and Country Club. That's that property doesn't flood it there.
I have not been part of that. Our client, I know, has been talking with the golf course. There was ideas of perhaps some tree removal and so on. The golf course was not interested in any tree removal whatsoever. So we've adjusted our design to eliminate the need for tree removal. There's been 3 or 4 versions of this plan, and what you see is as a final result that's come out of those discussions with Norfolk Golf and Country Club.
Thank you for that. And then just a next question, which actually might be staff oriented, but I'll ask you first. Do you foresee any issues or anything come up from the traffic study regarding the close proximity of the Golf and Country Club driveway to the access lane to these condos, given that that stretch of road is a sort of interesting bend to it?
The traffic study's been done. It's been submitted to county for review. I don't believe there were any concerns related to that. The traffic volumes coming out of this driveway, because there's only 6 units, are very low. We do have the benefit of being on the outside of the curve. So when you're sitting on the site waiting to turn left or right, just, you know, the curves are going away from you on both sides, which means you do still have long sight lines, and our traffic consultant is not concerned with that.
Any further questions to Mr. Valley? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, John, for coming. Is there anyone in council chambers who wishes to speak? Go ahead, sir. You can make your way up to that podium. If you wouldn't mind just signing in on the booklet when you get there, and there is a button you can turn on the microphone. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. Please go ahead and just present us with your name.
I came here, I didn't plan on speaking today, but I live directly across the street from the entrance to this residence at 205 Argyle. I've owned that home for 5 years, and I've seen what goes on in front of me. This property, the entrance to it is middle way up a hill. At the top of that hill is a curve. And there's an awful lot of traffic that comes flying off that hill, down the hill at a high rate of speed. This street is the main traffic corridor for a lot of seniors with disability scooters, wheelchairs, and bikes that go on the road up and down that hill because the sidewalk's too rough for them. In the 5 years I've seen there, I've seen a lot of traffic stops and slows for geese, but not for seniors. I'm afraid that somebody's going to get hurt there, because you're putting in 6 families, you got potential for 12 cars, and you can't remove the trees. You've got a blind driveway from the top. I'm concerned that there's going to be people hurt there, the way it's laid out. Thank you.
Thanks very much for providing us with your comments, and the staff will certainly take note of that as well. But would you mind just providing your name for the public record?
Sure, it's Dave Bartek. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for coming today, sir. Is there anyone on the line who wishes to speak to this report? Okay, seeing none, we have a staff recommendation today to receive the file as information, and that any comments received as part of the statutory public meeting be considered in a future recommendation staff report. Is there a mover and a seconder? Councillor Michelle Lee. Oh, Councillor Van Passen. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think Councilor Plum brought this up, but could we get an answer on that? Why would there be a need for a holding provision? That's just more paperwork and more paper to take it away later. Do we have sewer allocation for 6 units?
Mr. Sloan.
Through the chair, I'll try and help address that on behalf of our engineering colleagues. I would suggest that's something that planning staff can follow up with engineering, confirmed by the council report. At this point in time, this is one of the files that would fall under the new direction from Bill 23 that may no longer require site plan. So there may still be some advantage if a technical group such as engineering needs confirmation that it can function from a surfacing perspective before it goes right to building permit. But we'll confirm that with engineering to make sure. We do have some positives for Simcoe in terms of overall capacity. So I think the capacity question may not be the key. I think what's in the first draft of the bylaw is the standard wording that's been used for the last 2 years. It's more of a functional standpoint on this one. So we will work with engineering to double check that one for the final report.
And further to that, maybe you can keep the Ward 5 councillors and Mr. Valley looped in on a timeline for the final report to come back, whatever that may be. Councillor Breton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, I guess, through you to Brandon. Brandon, you mentioned this falls now under Bill 23. Does that mean that there's no development charges for these properties? And I guess had they started now, I just found it odd that for 3 units, I call them 3 units, that we would need a traffic study in that particular issue. But does that mean those kind of things would be exempt now if they were starting today?
Through the chair, I believe this form and the number of units is what's proposed. I think it's still, unless I'm incorrect, I think it still requires development charges for 6 semi-detached units. The traffic, my understanding, although I wasn't involved in the details of this application, but I see that it's called a brief. And so I don't think it's necessarily a full traffic study that was required for like total quantity of number of vehicles coming in and out, but it's more of the function of how going in and out of that driveway on this curve, on this bend that we've heard some questions today. I think it was getting a professional to provide a letter to confirm that it can function for these 6 units.
Okay, so I guess when you said with Bill 23, there's no site plan requirement now, what kind of things would be exempt, I guess?
Through the chair, so typically the things that are looked at through a site plan would include how a site is designed, laid out, function, exactly where the buildings are, the parking, the landscaping, the lighting, the garbage, some of the traffic movements, and anything else that might be associated with the site. I don't think this case necessarily has some of the other specifics, but that's a little bit of the items: sidewalk, sometimes parkland dedication. It depends on the nature of the site. So this is one that, as Mr. Valley indicated, looks like it could move much faster towards the building permit once we've confirmed some of the engineering items.
So is it, and I'm sorry, I'm maybe I just don't understand total involvement with Bill 23, but does that, with things that move, when we move forward with, say, a subdivision, are development charges definitely out of the picture, or are they in?
Through the chair, this particular file is not a subdivision necessarily. It's an individual site with new construction. So it depends on the type of buildings that are proposed and what they fall under the DC bylaw. But if it's a standard semi-detached dwellings, it would still have development charges.
So it is,
If there are other items, so the development charges bylaw has been updated recently, and so there's certain things about affordable housing or rental or even some non-residential that have deferral of payments or that have certain waivers. But if we're looking at, I think, standard straight semi-detached dwellings, then there's still development charges. There's some other directions of what the municipality can kind of collect and use that for, but it's still a requirement.
thank you.
Any other questions to Brandon? Okay. Looking for a mover and a seconder to receive it as information. Moved by Councillor Michelle, seconded by Councillor Brudden. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. That's all we have on the agenda today. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn at 3:38 p.m. Moved by Councillor Huffman. I almost missed you there, but and seconded by Councillor Berry. All those in favor? That is carried. And I've got a note here to remind council to bring your budget binders to tomorrow's meeting. We'll see you tomorrow in the morning. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Bye, Councillor Huffman. Thanks.